We were so busy asking whether we could that we never stopped to ask whether we should. Let's talk about Jurassic Park.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, Daniel, can you please let the people know what we're going to be discussing or debating today?
So this is Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. This week we are talking about 1993's Jurassic Park, which I've seen numerous times, and I think the two of you had seen at some point, but not in a while. So this was a more or less fresh viewing experience for both of you. So just to very quickly recap before we launch into it, Jurassic Park is a science fiction thriller about an amusement park in which scientists have figured out how to clone dinosaurs. And the story follows a number of visitors, including scientists and relatives of the park owner, to tour the park before the grand opening, at which point things go very wrong and the plot unfolds from there. So what did we think of Jurassic Park?
I think this was definitely like a nice family watch. I definitely enjoyed kind of like the theme of the consequences of trying to play God and control nature, especially like humanity's obsession with stuff like this. I understand why this had like a mass appeal, especially amongst for kids and adults, because of course it has strong performances all around. Overall, I had a good time. I had a good time with this one. Of course, there was some issues. It was a predictable plot, especially like with the way that the ending happened. However, I do feel like there couldn't have been another way in terms of how the film would have ended. Because it was an ending which did make sense, by the way, but it was still predictable at the end of the day, but still. Also, I was kind of impressed with the CGI. Bearing in mind this was 1993. I was pretty impressed with that one. It's got me ready for, the new Jurassic Park movie coming out.
Like Jonathan said, it's a good family movie. I think I might be a little bit too old to have enjoyed this as much as I probably would have enjoyed it if I was younger, or as much as I would have enjoyed it at for its time. Just because I don't think it's my type of movie anymore, in terms of the big attraction being dinosaurs being let loose and creeping around and hunting humans down, etc. I don't think that has a big appeal for me in today's age. I definitely do see how it can be perceived as a classic and how it is held in such high regard by everyone, just because the story in this is perfectly fine. They do a good job of building things up and bringing you to this facility, giving people the false sense of security that everything's under control. They thought everything through. They've kind of gone through all the measures, all the while that something's going to go completely wrong, and all the dinosaurs are going to be let loose. So all of that was fine. I had no problem with the stories, no problem with the leads in this. I thought they did, a really good job as well. Even the kids as well. I thought they were, quite charming in this, but it didn't grab me the way that it, probably has grabbed other people in terms of how much they love it and how much they feel like it's a perfect movie and it's amazing in every way. And that's not to say that I've got major negatives about the movie at all, but it's more a preference thing as opposed to this movie not being good for any type of reason. So we'll kind of get into the discussion of the movie. I don't think there's actually that many negatives in this. And I think everything that it is doing and it is trying to do, it does it well. But it just doesn't speak to me the same way it speaks to other people.
So before we go into the topic of wonder, which I think is the big attraction here, right? I want to briefly pick up on what you said, Jonathan, about the effects. In 1993, these were absolutely stunning effects. There's no comparing it to anything that else came out in that time. Like the dinosaurs look absolute, like not 100% real, but they are believable, right? They feel really there. They mix animatronics and CG and other kinds of effects to maximum effect. Like when the T-Rex goes after somebody or even after another dinosaur, I felt it was there. I had zero problems with suspending my disbelief, and even more than 30 years later, it absolutely works for me. Like I'm totally there with these dinosaurs. The one that looked kind of janky is when the scientist and the two children are trapped in a tree, and the Brontosaurus, I think it is, shows up. That looks like a puppet to me. It's probably because it is one, but every other effect, like especially when the cars are stuck on the tracks and the T-Rex is getting loose and it starts going after them, and there's this scene where it kind of leans down and through the car window you see the eye darting back and forth. It's absolutely amazing, I think. Not in terms of just the effects being impressive. Like in the last 30 years, we've had more and better spectacle, but I think it absolutely holds up. And I think in 1993, it absolutely blew people's minds for good reason.
I think I agree with that. And that was like one of the big things that I was paying attention to was how real does it feel, and, how alive do these dinosaurs feel? And like you said, that scene when they're trapped in the car and you can see the dinosaur kind of like pushing the car back and forth, etc. You do really believe that it's there. I didn't think that I was watching a puppet in that scene. You did mention, obviously, the Brontosaurus where you felt, it maybe kind of took you out a little bit. I think there was like one other scene for me. I can't remember who it was that was getting attacked by the dinosaurs, and it was like an ambush in the bush. Of course, because of the limitations in technology, etc., they couldn't really show. I can't remember who it was.
Were you talking about when the guy got attacked in the car?
No, I don't think it was in the car. There was just like that one scene. I can't remember off the top of my head. Sorry, I remember now. It was Muldoon, the guy that had the shotgun, and he was like in the bushes, and he was hunting, and I think he made like a comment about like well played or something like that to the dinosaur, and then he got attacked. It was that scene where I was like, it looks a bit fake the way that he was killed in that scene. But that was like one of my only other ones where I was like, it doesn't look that great.
Yeah, there's definitely one or two here or there, right? But like broadly, it creates the illusion and if you at all are on board with what's going on, then the illusion is going to work, right? It's going to convince you that there are dinosaurs running around. Which I think is a really big step, right? If you're not on board with that, then the entire movie doesn't work, obviously, right? One other thing you mentioned, I think Herbert, you mentioned this, is kind of this idea of wonder and childlike fascination with dinosaurs, right? And I gotta say, I'm not a big dinosaur guy, right? Like I'm not, like it's not a particular interest of mine, but I think the entire first 25, 30 minutes where they introduce the characters and we go to the park and we get kind of the exposition of how everything works and what they've done and what they've built. And then when they kind of drive into the park and they just see the dinosaurs just walking, like a herd of brontosauruses or whatever it is in the distance. And these experienced scientists who have dedicated their lives to dinosaurs, but it's not something they can ever encounter or ever thought they would encounter. And then they see it, and then they're right there next to the children, and they're both equally amazed. And I think that is a sense of wonder and of joy that this movie really communicates. This idea that somebody made a dinosaur. It's an old movie now, right? And we've all seen it, and we've seen the sequels and whatever else, and we've seen more fantastical things in movies. But to me, there's still something magical about the idea that somebody made a dinosaur. You know what I mean? Like that is something this movie really captures.
Is the way that they were made as well is what made me like the film more. They were trying to play God, and we've done things in like society right now. Like I saw this recent article not too long ago that says, I think scientists have found a way to increase your lifetime, your lifespan or something like that. And I was like, flipping out. So seeing the scientists create the dinosaurs and actually and then seeing the dinosaurs coming like, on the screen was like, yeah, I could believe this. And that's what made me kind of like believe more, as in like what I was seeing, and made kind of like my experience more better, because I'm like, this is some crazy stuff humans would actually do, and actually seeing it actually on the big screen was crazy. It was crazy, especially like like you said in the beginning where you see the first, I don't know what dinosaur that was, but what dinosaur was that? What dinosaur was the first dinosaur that we saw?
The very first scene is about a raptor, right? If I remember correctly, the one where they're transporting the raptor, and that's the first foreshadowing that this is not easy to control, right?
But I meant the one when they're on the field, where it's pretty much like it's used in every, like you will see this all over social media. It was like a cultural moment where the main actor zooms into the camera when he sees the first dinosaur when they're on the field. Forgot.
I guess that's the herd of brontosauruses.
Yeah, it must be that one. But yeah, so that scene there was what I was like, okay, that's what kind of like grabbed my interest even more. That this looks pretty cool. Looks pretty cool. Even though I did say the special effects wasn't the greatest in comparison to what I'm saying. However, I did appreciate it. It did look good for its time.
I think, Daniel, what you kind of explained was probably some of the best parts of the movie for me, in terms of actually kind of living through the scientists, especially because, again, we're introduced to them, they're studying the remains of a dinosaur, the fossils, etc. And then just to see not their wonder, because I don't want to kind of like repeat that word, but just like seeing the amazement on their face of actually seeing a dinosaur. I don't know, it kind of like brought me into the movie and kind of made me, you know, see it through their lens and actually have that joy for them. I think that's kind of like one thing that the movie did really well, was making me enjoy it through the perspective of the characters in the movie. Every time that they were using their knowledge for dinosaurs to actually, you know, navigate the situations that they were in, or whether it was like, again, seeing it for the first time, that amazement, you know, going through the whole presentation that they had when they first came to the facility, and actually like, you know, just like, again, their amazement as to like everything that was happening and everything that you dedicate your life to. It's almost like coming to real life, and you're taking that next step into sort of what you dedicated to, and, you know, one that you never thought would be possible. So I thought that was, for me, some of the best parts of it.
See, what made it even better as well was where like it was gonna be like an amusement park, which kind of like adds to the whole childlike fascination that we had when it comes to Jurassic Park. So I don't know, just putting it in that setting, in that environment, kind of like the storyline, the plot pretty much was what, like, okay, yeah, that's pretty cool, pretty believable, as well as the great effects. So I think all in all, it kind of just enhanced the story as well as kind of like the believability.
And you mentioned earlier this idea of playing God, right? Which is a huge topic in this. And normally I don't like that concept at all, like in movies or otherwise. Like, it's pretty arbitrary typically, what is and isn't playing God and what we are and aren't supposed to do. And like a few weeks ago, scientists announced that they brought an extinct species of wolf back, right? So the species of wolf had been extinct for I don't know how long, and they basically reconstructed its DNA and brought it back to life. And now this extinct species exists. And it's not a dinosaur, but it is kind of the same thing, right? And I don't know that there's anything wrong with that, right? And generally, I think this movie really leans on the scales of saying that this just should never have been done, right? That I think every time I watch Jurassic Park, like Malcolm especially goes on about his speeches about chaos theory and life finds a way, and, you know, the hubris of the scientists. I'm kind of rolling my eyes a little bit, like, really, like, like, these are animals, right? Like, yes, it's new, yes, it's misunderstood, and, you know, there's some good points in there. Sattler makes at one point this point that these people have no idea what ecosystems these dinosaurs are adapted to, right? And they've been resurrecting plant species based on how cool they look and not based on the actual ecology of it and stuff like this, right? Like, there's some good points in there, but just the basic idea that reviving dinosaurs is obviously a bad and reckless and stupid idea that can only go wrong is just not something I agree with. So that has always been something where the movie kind of had an uphill battle with me. At the end of the day, these are just animals.
For me, why I kind of semi-agreed with him was just because of the sheer size of these and how, you know, dangerous these dinosaurs can potentially be if something did go wrong. I feel like there's a difference between, you know, maybe bringing back species of a plant or a wolf, etc., where I think you have a little bit more control over it. And again, you know, in this movie, it tried to, you know, sell you on the idea that they had all of these measures in place, even down to, I think it was like the protein or something like that they needed to eat to, you know, to stay alive. But for me, where I agreed with him was, it was just like, yeah, it could be fine, and this could be fine for a certain amount of time, but the minute it goes wrong, there's going to be so many lives that are, you know, that are at stake for when it goes wrong. And yeah, that's why I was a bit like hesitant, a bit more on the side of, we probably shouldn't be playing with this, and we're maybe pushing a little bit further than we need to.
Like, when you actually look at what goes wrong and why things happen, there's some things in there, like, for instance, that apparently, like, the dinosaurs can change sex spontaneously, so that they, even though they are made to be all female so that they can't breed, they will in fact change sex spontaneously, and that means they are breeding, and that means the population is not under control. But one thing that's actually kind of refreshing in this is that the corporations are not the problem. One of my big, like, I have a long list of hobby horses, right? But one of them is that evil corporations in movies don't usually behave like evil corporations. Like, there are specific ways in which corporations or companies can go bad and can cause harm and hurt people. And that usually means when they are offloading the cost of their business on somebody else, or when they abuse privileged access to a market or whatever, or a monopoly or something. Like, there are specific ways in which corporations can go bad and can hurt people. But movie corporations, when they're evil, they often are just evil. And like my favorite example of this is the Umbrella Corporation in Resident Evil, where my question is, as usual, where's the profit in destroying the world? Who's gonna buy your stock options? But anyway, like on the surface, this is kind of, again, evil company, human greed, whatever, right? That is the problem. But actually, the corporate guy is the voice of reason in this, right? He's constantly trying to rein in Hammond, right? And Hammond is doing this because he's an idealist, and this is his life's work, and this is his passion project. And he's cutting all these corners and dismissing all of these concerns because he wants to do this, right? And he has the money to do it, but ultimately it's his project and it's his passion. And the accountant guy is until he gets eaten by a T-Rex on the toilet, which, if you're gonna go out, you might as well go out in style, right? He's constantly talking about risk and liability and all of these things. Like, he's looking at this from a corporate point of view, but he's always urging caution, right? Like, hey, maybe let's not let's not set up a situation in which our product might eat our customer. Like, how about that, right? It's kind of refreshing because in a lot of movie, like in a lesser movie, the evil corporation would be the one pushing for this, right? And in this movie, they're not. And then what actually makes everything go wrong is just the personal greed of Nedry, right? He's the IT guy. He has this gambling debt, and he's been asking for raises, and he's not been getting them, and so he's been selling these embryos to I don't even know, I don't remember who he sold it to, but like, he sabotages the entire system for the reason of being able to steal these embryos, right? So this is not a systemic failure. This is not just human greed. This is just one person acting in a purely selfish way and kind of sabotaging the entire thing, because the movie did not really convince me that the safety precautions that they did have were in fact insufficient. If Nedry hadn't sabotaged them, then maybe this would not have gone quite as far.
I know you mentioned about the accountant being the voice of reason and having pushing. I didn't even think he was all that wrong and all that bad in this as well. It was just, again, like you mentioned, it was just a bit of a passion project for him. He just wanted to, fulfill his own dream and his own his own fantasies. And in doing so, he kind of lost sight of some of the steps, and again, tried to take the shortcut in a few instances, but it wasn't to a point where it was detrimental to everyone there. It was still safety precautions, which, like you said, would have worked if Nedry didn't go rogue. That's one thing that you kind of overlook, is that you're so concerned about the dinosaurs, you're so concerned about these monsters getting out, is that you kind of forget you kind of forget about the monsters within some people. And Nedry's one was greed, and you kind of lose sight of how valuable these dinosaurs are, and how much money that they could be worth. Is that you don't think about the people that are in close proximity to it, the people that have access to these things. People can be bought off, people can be whatever. So yeah, I don't think it was like all the way wrong, but that was just like the one thing he didn't look at, was how do you make sure that the people working on this aren't compromised and don't try to exploit what they're doing for their own personal gains.
Going off to what you said, I think they all had unchecked scientific ambitions, and that kind of, I wouldn't say foreshadowed, but it did kind of set a foundation where the whole Jurassic Park world, just this whole project, was rooted in failure. And I think, obviously, because like you said, they all had different ambitions. Of course, like, they could have had some sort of control of nature, but because already, like we said, like, everyone had different ambitions when it came to the dinosaurs. So it was like, okay, yeah, you could tell already, like, they don't even have control within their own space. So how can they expect to control dinosaurs? You know what I'm saying? Like for example, how do zoo runs? Zoo runs on, like, everyone needs to kind of be like a one accord, follow rules, etc., etc. Everyone just needs to be on one accord. That's how they manage to contain lions, all these dangerous animals. So if you're already within an environment where, like I said, everyone's just just on different accords, then yeah, it was already rooted in failure.
But that kind of proves my point, because I've been to like zoos and wildlife reserves and whatever, where there were really dangerous animals around, and you really need to know what you're doing. Imagine what would happen if you take like a zoo and the night security guy unlocks all the doors because somebody wants to buy, like, I don't know, like a crocodile skin or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, somebody's gonna get hurt, right? And the things get out and they start hiding in the bushes, and then they eat like a visitor the next morning. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand what's fundamentally different between a T-Rex and like an alligator or a lion or whatever, right? Like remember Harambe, like 10 years ago, like this gorilla,
Yeah.
where I think what happened was that a child fell into the gorilla
Yeah.
enclosure, and then they tried to get the child back, and then I think the gorilla
Kept on bringing him back.
and then I think they had to kill.
Killed,
I don't remember if
they
the kid
killed the
died or
gorilla.
if
Yeah.
they killed the gorilla
I
at the
think
end,
I
right?
can't remember.
So yeah, so is that so different? Are like zoos just a disaster waiting to happen, or is this movie like leaning on the scales a little bit?
That's a very good
I feel
question.
like there's
And
a
it's
difference.
yeah,
Yeah, there's a difference between, and I know lions and gorillas, etc. Once they're out, hard to tame, etc. And to be fair, there probably isn't, too much difference because, yeah, there probably isn't too much difference. But it's just the sheer scale of it. It's like, if I see a lion, I think I could probably survive. Not that I'd survive. If there's a group of people, I might survive. If there's a dinosaur, like I might be in a building thinking I'm safe, and I get trampled on in that building because the dinosaur's just reckless and just knocking everything over. Like the guy in the toilet, like he thought he was all safe. He thought he was all good. And again, like with the lion as well. If I'm in a car, I kind of think I'm a little bit safe in the car with the dinosaur. That dinosaur, yeah, I don't feel safe until I'm on the other side of the planet from where the dinosaur is.
Yeah, but imagine you're like in the zoo, right? And you're on the toilet, and then a chimpanzee gets into the stall. Like, this does not end well for you.
No,
You know what I
not at all.
mean?
Yeah. No, of course. But if the chimpanzee's outside and I'm in the stall and I'm super quiet, kind of hope that he just kind of passes by without, taking too much notice of the stall.
Yeah, so but that kind of gets kind of like, to cut to the chase, like every time I watch this, I'm totally on board with the wonder and with the reality of these dinosaurs and with like the horror aspect of it, like when these predators are out, right? Especially the raptors and the T-Rex, and it's all great, right? But like in the back of my head, I'm kind of like, this is just a zoo. Like you're stacking the deck just a little bit. This is not fundamentally a bad idea.
just to understand. So for you, are you trying to say that's what made the idea not as great because it's because it's just a zoo, like you're saying?
Basically, yeah. Like you've been saying this, you've been alluding to this idea, right? That this movie is very much driven by playing God, human arrogance. This should not have been done. And I'm like, really? Like fundamentally, this is not such a bad idea. Like there's two mistakes here. One is obviously Nedry, right? Sabotaging the entire thing for personal gain. And I stand by my comparison about like the night watch guy, right? In a zoo, right? Unlocking the alligator cage. Or whatever, right? But also Hammond should have waited longer to study this, right? If they had taken if they had just spent another year just studying these things, they would have realized, oh, hey, they're breeding. You know what I mean? Like the big mistake was rushing it. If they had just waited a little bit and studied them properly and, had the proper safety, like they have a bunch of safety precautions, but they're not really taking their time, right? They're just anticipating issues and coming up with pretty sensible security measures. But if this was realistic, like you wouldn't just go straight to zoo, right? You would study them for a while, like even just scientifically, and then you would think about, okay, how can we monetize this, right? Like what can we do with this? But a zoo will not display an animal that they don't understand, for example, right? So there's a certain realism is kind of a dicey issue when we're talking about a movie about cloned dinosaurs, right? But like the believability issue here is that they would just build the park immediately and not study these things sufficiently until they actually understand them. Because pretty much every issue, like just how smart the raptors are and the fact that they can breed and like all these ecology issues, like this triceratops that they find that's been poisoned by some plant. If they had just spent taken a year to study these things, all of that would have come out. And then they would have fixed it. And then the actual park would have not had these problems. So fundamentally, there's a believability issue here because people are going to say, well, like it's just greed, right? Obviously, they go straight to selling tickets and merchandise and whatever. And like there's some cool scenes in here, right? Like when the raptors go rampaging in the visitor center, the camera just pans across like shelves and shelves of merchandise, t-shirts and mugs and action figures and whatever, right? They went straight to monetizing it. But I'm just saying that part is not that realistic, I don't think. So how important is it for a movie like this to actually be realistic? Does the tension still hold up if fundamentally you don't believe that this is happening? Like on that level? Like assume for a second you agree with what I just said, right? I have a feeling that you don't really, but like just assume for a second. Does that not undermine the effect of the story a little bit, where all of these problems are kind of contrived a little bit, where it's just kind of that way because the script says so?
I think there's always going to be an issue. Like, no matter how much you try to, mitigate the risk, no matter how much you try to study, no matter how much you try to understand, the seriousness of, certain animals or dinosaurs that you're dealing with, there's always a level of risk, and there's always a level of, somewhat evolution or adaptation that you might look past, or, something that if you consider this, but this might still happen, or whatever. So while I agree with you that if they took an extra year, they would have, discovered some of these things that did pop up, but there probably would have been something else. Like, there would have been another reason why, the raptors were able to get out. There would have been another reason why, like the T-Rex, maybe the T-Rex got a little bit too big, or, something that they were feeding the T-Rex, caused it to grow bigger than what its genetics, was in the past, or something like that. And they couldn't control it. There could have been, something else. So for me, anyways, in this type of movie, you kind of need something to go wrong for the action to happen. And how they presented it, I was like, oh, it's fine. I kind of can get on board with it.
But how important is it to make it plausible? Right? Like let's say you believe that they are creating a situation where everything goes wrong, but it shouldn't have. So what I'm trying to get at is, does a movie need to come up with a scenario that is believable in this way? Or is that kind of part of the buy-in, where you just say, well, obviously we're here because something goes wrong, and this is what goes wrong. And then we can skip right to the good parts, which is people being stalked by velociraptors.
I do think that it needs to make sense. It can't just be, something dumb that happens that, okay, oh, oopsie, this happened, and then all of a sudden all the dinosaurs are let loose. I don't think it can be clumsy or lazy with it. But I don't think that the movie was completely lazy with it in this as well. I don't think the dinosaurs breeding, for example, was a major issue as to why everything went wrong. I feel like, you can put everything solely on Ned. And even all the things that you did mention probably would have been an issue, at some point down the line when the park was open, but they would have been able to identify it and be like, okay, we need to take care of this, or we can maybe shut the park for a set period of time whilst we, take care of what's going on. But fundamentally, it's Ned just went a bit rogue and got a little bit greedy and decided to sabotage the system. And in them trying to, fix the system, and in Hammond trying to sort of preserve what he can whilst fixing the situation and trying to get his grandkids back, just more things ended up going wrong. I didn't look at it in this movie and think it wasn't, plausible, it wasn't believable how everything went, kind of turned to shit.
And also, it could kind of show, like, you can kind of view the film as the consequences of what happens when one falls out of line, or when one doesn't kind of like follow basic rules. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to a system, like how doing one thing wrong can have like a domino effect that affects everything. So
it's not even just like one person falling out of line, because in the scenario that they kind of gave him an unsympathetic, reason as to why he defected and decided to be a little bit greedy. But you could quite easily plug and play it with, someone that has a daughter that's really sick and doesn't have the money to, take care of their child. You can, replace it with like someone that's about to lose a house and is in a dire situation, or something like that. You could have sort of kind of like replaced Ned with any other sympathetic cause or unsympathetic cause. It kind of doesn't change the fact that someone might choose to put themselves above everyone else because of the tough situation they find themselves in.
And Nedry should not have had so much control, right? Like, in a more reasonably designed system, two people need to sign off on rebooting the system, for example. Both of them have to be corrupt, or both of them have to make the same mistake, right? And that already creates resilience, right? And there's a reason why security protocols like this exist, right? Like, I imagine zoos kind of have something like this. I don't know this for sure, but I would imagine that if you go into like the alligator enclosure, maybe somebody else is watching, for example, right? I imagine. I don't know if this is true, but typically, like, there are safety precautions like this, right?
Yeah. But my main point was just like, when obviously just someone's incompetence could just have like a powerful domino effect that just kind of like creates chaos. So
this is a factor of Hammond cutting corners, right? Like, this, he wants to get this done as quickly as possible. He just wants to see the result. Like, this is all basically comes down to one person. Nedry is the one who's corrupt and who pulls the trigger, but Hammond put him into a position where he could do this, right? One other thing I want to bring up is that this movie has had, 5 sequels, something like that, and there's another one coming out next month. this seems to be one of those movies that is kind of a one movie story, but because it's so successful, it spawns a whole bunch of sequels. But I'm not convinced that there's much of a story there after the first movie, right?
I don't remember when the last Jurassic Park was, but I'm sure there's like quite a few years like, in between each release. Even though the story, there might not be like a compelling story, I do think it's because we like dinosaurs. They kind of like I said, the breaks in between get us ready for the next one, if that makes sense. So there is a market for these type of films, is what I'm trying to say. Personally, for me, I think even though there might not be like a compelling story in the sequels, I still feel it's like John Wick, for example. Like John Wick, I don't like the storylines aren't like the best. It's pretty much generic. However, we're there to see the action. Same with these films. Like the storylines might not be as compelling or great in Jurassic Park, but we're there to see the dinosaurs. As long as the storyline is cool, decent, just give us the dinosaurs.
Even having watched this, I thought that there was opportunities to create more stories out of this, because now you have a world with dinosaurs on it. Of course, we had, the few people in this particular facility that knew about it and were, in close proximity and sort of kind of understood the situation that was going on. But now you have this remote island with dinosaurs, etc., in it, and it's like, okay, what can you do from there? Like, what stories can you tell? What happens if people kind of like wash up on shore here for whatever reason and kind of like discover these dinosaurs in this place or whatever. The whole thing is Jurassic Park as well. And it teased the idea of this being a theme park. And, it wasn't fully realized in this particular movie, but it's a case of, oh, what if it actually did go well? And, what if we did actually open the park? And, how would it be if it wasn't actually people that knew how to deal with the dinosaurs in this? What if it was just like regular park goers or whatever? I'm not fully knowledgeable on all the sequels. I think I've seen the one with Chris Pratt in it, but I haven't seen too many of the others. But I felt like there was still leg room for this to go in multiple different places from where the ending point was in this movie.
Yeah, Jurassic World certainly showed us an actually operational park, right? Which was new. It seems to me like I'm not necessarily dunking on the entire franchise. If somebody likes the entire franchise, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying they keep making these movies and they seem to all we have a bit of setup and then we have people running from dinosaurs for an hour. And it kind of seems to be the story. Like, I'm not entirely sure that the franchise is actually going somewhere. Jurassic World Rebirth is coming out in a few weeks, and I like the trailer. Like, the dinosaurs look cool. There's a whole bunch of them a whole bunch of species that we haven't seen before. And there seems to be this whole thing about going into the ruins of the park to recover like the DNA, because the plot seems to be that it's about genetic research, that they expect to derive some kind of medicine from this. And that's kind of the beginning of a story, right? Like that's at least an idea. It's more like, I really want to I would really like it if there was like 5-6 movies and they told a story, right? Like there was a progression there, and by the end of the series, the world is different than when it started. Because Jurassic Park 1 is very much our world, except somebody cloned dinosaurs, but then it kind of seems like stuck at that level. And I've always found it a little bit frustrating, where I want to go somewhere and it seems to never do. Like even Jurassic World didn't really.
But wouldn't that bring an end to the franchise? As in, like, if you're building up towards a story, then that could give you like what 5-6 movies. I don't think that's exactly what they're trying to do. Like this, this is a cash cow film where they see like, let's kind of have like each movie has a closed story. Let's just create closed story type of movies, and we'll just cash in as much as we can.
I think I actually kind of understand Daniel's complaint. I don't think I got it the first time, but what you're saying is
as well.
Yeah. No, I know. But I'm just saying, like, I got it kind of wrong the first time when I was like, the story can kind of go in different places. You're just saying that the stories aren't building on one another. We're not leaving the world in a new place or like, better from, the previous movie, is essentially what you're kind of getting at. But what I would counteract with that is, if the main attraction in this is dinosaurs being let loose and people running from dinosaurs, is it too different from, something like the slasher genre, where you're kind of going there to see people get killed by, whether it's a clown or a guy in a mask or Freddy Krueger or whoever it is, you kind of just know what you're going in there for, pretty much, and you don't really care for any, world building or lore building. And I know that they try to incorporate it in some slasher series, but in this, it very much feels like the gimmick is letting dinosaurs loose. And is it significantly different from, say, like a slasher genre or any other genre that has its gimmick and its idea and its style and executes it in every single movie, knowing that's what the customers want? Does it need to really push the boundaries of, okay, we have to tell like a good, not cohesive story across all the movies, but a good progressive story across all the movies?
I'm mostly thinking out loud, right? Like, it's like, shouldn't this go somewhere? And there are other franchises too, like the Terminator franchise tends to always remake Terminator 2 or Terminator 1, right? Depending on the movie. The Predator franchise tends to be Alien, goes somewhere, encounters somebody, a human earns their respect, and then they fight somebody. You know, like on a very high level, it's kind of the same story, kind of repeated in different settings. And this is not, like you say, if there's a slasher franchise with 5 movies in it, and each one is ultimately slasher shows up, kills some people in different ways. Isn't that the same thing? And my answer is kind of, yeah. And I'm more asking, is that a problem? Should this have been different? Should this have gone somewhere? Because the premise, I don't know, it just does not. It seems like you need to do something with the premise, right? Like, you have to justify why there is a place with the dinosaurs and why people go there. It just occurred to me watching this, is like, this is kind of a complete story. And this is kind of not really setting up a status quo where people can be chased by dinosaurs forever.
What was that scene at the end with when they were in the helicopter and they were flying away from the island? I can't remember properly. Were they birds or were they dinosaur birds? I don't know what they're called, pterodactyls or whatever, whatever the name is. I don't know whether it was like kind of like setting that up for, you know, dinosaurs that could fly and like, you know, were able to like migrate and kind of like spread their wings. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't remember if it was or wasn't.
I don't remember off the top of my head. And then that raises the question of why make flying dinosaurs? Also, it's an island that should be self-contained, right? So why make species that can, you know, escape from the island and so on, right? I don't have a big thesis about this. It's more like, it's kind of like one of the big venerable Hollywood franchises, right? It's been around for 30 years. There's like 6 or 7 movies in it. And it's kind of missing a point. Like, if you just look at the thing in totality, or like, where is it going outside of dinosaurs? Exclamation mark. What else is there? It's just an observation more than anything.
Yeah. And I get you. These movies make a lot of money as well. If I remember correctly, Jurassic World,
Yeah.
The one with Chris Pratt, made over $1 billion in the franchise.
Yeah,
I don't know
approaching
how
2
much.
maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how much Dominion made. The one where they kind of brought back. I didn't even watch that movie, but the one where they brought back all the original actors and mixed them with the new cast. I'm sure that made money as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. But
Oh yeah, they all
it
print
seems
money,
like,
yeah.
$1 billion as well.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, so it's like, if people like it and people want it without the extra story, and again, that's like one of the complaints that you have with, you know, and again, this franchise is nowhere near coming close to what the MCU is with its 30 plus movies, but somewhere along the line, if you continue to sort of build on the previous story and build on the previous story, one, people start to miss the jumping on point for these type of movies, and I think, you know, you kind of need to make these movies have a broad appeal to, you know, kind of justify the budgets that it costs to make these movies and to make it as profitable as possible. But also, you don't want people getting lost to a point where you don't feel like you can watch the latest movie coming out because you haven't watched everything else that's come before. So with Rebirth, I can imagine it's new cast, new people, new situation, even though it might be in the same world, but it's a fresh sort of kind of like start and it's a fresh jumping on point for people in this type of movie. It's kind of like Final Fantasy, and this is kind of taking it to a gaming context. I'm pretty sure there's like Final Fantasy like 20 something. And I always hear people talk about it. I always hear how much people love the Final Fantasy series. I can never jump onto the game because it's like 20 games in, and I'm like, I have no clue what I'm doing. I feel like I've missed the boat on this, and they just keep making new game after new game. I don't even have like a starting point for Final Fantasy anymore. So yeah, I don't think there's too much of an issue as to how they've approached it. Maybe they could have probably told better stories in some of the movies that they put out, but I don't think it needs to completely sort of be a continuous story or build on, you know, what's come before.
First of all, I'm not here to police people's fun, right? I get enjoyment out of these movies, at least on a spectacle level. More often than not, they do deliver on that. And obviously, these movies make money, so there's demand for it. So I don't want to get into anybody's way on that front. It's more like, as a viewer, as an enjoyer of stories, I'm kind of asking, what's the big story? Like, and I'm not saying it has to be one continuous narrative that continues from each movie, where it's like a 6-movie series in that sense, where it's one story that unfolds over 6 movies. I was more thinking along the lines of just as a big concept of what Jurassic Park is about. It kind of seems to kind of always repeat. And this is not true for all of them. There have been a few that kind of branch out a little bit, but these tend to be more like, it starts with, let's make another one because the last one made money, so what can we do in this one? And what setup can we have that involves people running away from dinosaurs in the end? It's a little bit unsatisfying, and it does not spark my imagination
Yeah,
the way the first movie did.
yeah, I get what you're saying, because that could kind of like be shown in worldly attitude, the way that like each movie, for example, it could like, in the second film, it could show that okay, human beings were very like careless when it comes to the dinosaurs. In the third movie, like an example of what you're saying could be like, okay, now the attitude's shifted and it's changed, that they're more cautious, for example. But whereas I feel like in each film is pretty much the same. I wouldn't say they're clueless, but they is pretty much they're in the same environment, the same attitude towards the dinosaurs that you're seeing in each film. That's just an example I'm giving, but it could be a progression in that, for example, to kind of show that there is an advancement when it comes to Jurassic Park as a whole. So I do see what you're saying, but I just feel like what they're doing is intentional. It's like Love Island, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, you know what, like Love Island is the same thing. Sometimes they'll do something new, but the main selling point of it is people are finding love on the island. So I think with Jurassic Park, it's the same thing. Like there's different storylines, but the main thing is people are running away from dinosaurs. I see why they wouldn't put as much effort as, in the totality of things, right? Just kind of like give us what the people seem to want, because that's a reflection in the box office sales. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on Jurassic Park?
Overall, it's a good film. I am kind of like looking forward to the new Jurassic Park film that's coming. It's gonna be interesting to see if, just kind of going off Daniel's points, it's gonna be interesting to see if there's any progression. If what they've done so different is kind of like gonna tell us if they're gonna kind of like create a storyline now. Because who knows? The trailer does seem really good, so I am kind of like, this film has made me excited to see the second film.
It was a good movie, and again, I kind of still reiterate that it's not. It didn't speak to me the way it speaks to other people. It didn't make me more excited for the new Jurassic Park movie coming out at all, just because it's not 100% my type of movie. And I know we had the whole debate about, what should this movie do, or, what does it need to do to kind of like evolve the franchise. I'm like Daniel, I'm a story person, but I do see the appeal that this type of movie has for certain people who just kind of want the spectacle of dinosaurs eating human beings or chasing human beings. I did quite like the family aspect of it as well. It kind of did make me think, I can imagine watching this with my kid when he's a little bit older. And I actually did like the journey that they kind of took Grant on from the start, where he was like absolutely against kids, hated kids or whatever, and then was just put in a situation where he had to look after these two kids and actually spend some time with them, get to know them a little bit more, kind of see that there were some similarities between him and the little boy, and then obviously had to sort of care for the little girl as well that was in this, who also came in and saved the day. So there's a lot to like in this type of movie. Good enough story in this, and that's kind of what we ask for when you want to do a spectacle. Just make sure the story is serviceable, make sure that the characters are enjoyable at the bare minimum, and you can kind of get behind the dynamics between the characters in these type of movies. Yeah, I think. Overall, again, for its time, for when this came out, I feel like the creature features, the dinosaurs that we see in this, are all really well handled, really well made. The way that they handle the horror aspects of it as well, in terms of the dinosaurs stalking the humans. Apart from the one scene when they're chasing little kids, I didn't like that, especially with the dinosaurs opening the doors. I was like, it's a little bit ridiculous. I was like, okay, cool. You're kind of taking me out of the movie with these dinosaurs just like carefully opening up these doors and pushing it open. I was like, okay, yeah, we're doing too much here. But otherwise, very enjoyable, very good.
Yeah, I've been criticizing this movie for an hour, and that's the part where it's interesting, because on a basic level, this movie does wonder and fear kind of embodied in the same thing, right? The dinosaurs are both a source of childlike wonder and of terror and of existential fear. Marrying those two things together without contradiction, but rather having them be like two sides of the same coin, I think it really works. The characters really work. The family aspect really works. It's got the right mix of emotion and action and heart. This is like peak Hollywood on some levels, right? In terms of bringing these kind of ingredients together and creating an experience, right? And then there's like a couple of asterisks here about, hey, this whole hand-wringing about chaos and uncontrollability and life finds a way, is that really all that insightful or true or relevant? I do think the movie would be better if that part had been a little bit more convincing, because at the end of the day, they're just animals. But it does not ruin a great movie, in my opinion. So that's kind of the bottom line for me.
Right. All right, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in today's episode.
If you reached this part of the episode, thank you very much for working with us. We appreciate your support. Of course, if you liked everything you heard and you enjoyed this discussion, tell a friend. And if you hated everything and you thought we were just a bunch of poorly made dinosaur reviewers, tell an enemy. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast.
All right, guys. You heard it here first. We'll catch you next week. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.